personal one.
Put your phone on.
I actually have a very cute anecdotal story about Bruce's interest in moss. It was during the middle of summer when he got very excited in it, and it was dry. The moss was all receded. And so he was walking around with water bottles to get it to bloom. And it was so exciting to him that one day he came with 2 big gallons of water, and he put them in his backpack, and he walked around and poured all of it out, and he came to the nature center and said, I'm so dehydrated. I gave all this moss water and I don't have any water. And then the next day he came and he did the same thing, and then he swung his backpack on his back with all the water, and I guess pinched his nerve, and he came to the nature center and said, I'm really injured. I just hurt myself with all the water for the moss. So he was very committed to his moss interests. Hi, Holly. It's good to see you.
I apologize. I have to
go. Okay. It is 10 o'clock, so I'll start on time. I'm Allison Federick. I'm the site supervisor here at the Idyllwild Nature Center, and I'm very grateful that I know so many of you. I am very saddened by this shocking loss. I think a lot of people were stunned, especially knowing how much that how active Bruce was in the community and here. The one wonderful thing that I want to get to share with people is that our new botany exhibit is going to show only Bruce's photos.
Yay.
I've received a grant to create a touch screen, and the touch screen has his favorite species of flowers, although it's hard to say that because he had thousands of favorite species, but it has some of his favorite species, and he created the text about them. And so he really does have a legacy here. Beyond that exhibit, however, he spent years dedicating time and energy and his education and interests to the Nature Center. His passion, his footsteps are all over here, and I honestly believe in the philosophy that the ground will never forget him. So just knowing that he has left many imprints here is a joy. I'm very thankful that I got to spend so much time with him and hear so many of his funny stories and hear about his life. So I'm glad that he had all of you in his life too, whether it was near or at a distance, just knowing what he was doing. But he was definitely an Idyllwild staple. I'm grateful that we can also share that today here under our 600-year-old oak tree, which he also loved. And we had an anthill. Here's one more anecdotal story. We had an anthill that I guess is honestly protecting the tree. Somebody told me that it was not. And so he reassured me. He said, that tree isn't going anywhere. Those ants are not going to do anything. This tree is just fine. So it also has his blessing on it. This is just one example of one of the things he did come to see every day that he visited here. So I don't really have much more to say than that. Just that thank you for being here today. I know that we have a few other people who will speak. Chris is the one that will pass the baton to people. But thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'll stay until we have a nature hike coming from the campground, so I'll stay until then. But yeah, they're not here yet. Yeah.
Wow, I am amazed and thrilled that all of you showed up, and I know so many of you. I guess there's a minority that I don't know, so that's reassuring. My name is Chris Brault, and if you don't know me, I'm the creator of Good Morning Idyllwild. I've lived here for 32 years. And the reason I'm involved with Bruce, because as you'll see on this thing I read, is because I didn't really know Bruce that much. I encountered Bruce, like all of us did, here, there, everywhere. I encountered him at Nomad Ventures, if I go in there. I encountered him one morning out walking, counting butterflies. He was getting ready for the giant butterfly count, and he was there, and I talked to him for a few minutes. And obviously I knew who he was, but I didn't know him real well. And when he passed away, suddenly, and I did know this before, my daughter-in-law, Amanda, this is my son, Adam, he grew up here in Idyllwild. He's a hillbilly. That means a whole year. And his wife, Amanda, said, I'm going to the Nature Center Wildflowers show to see my Uncle Bruce. And I go, your Uncle Bruce? She goes, yeah, Bruce Watts is my uncle. Bruce Watts is your uncle. I was astounded, and so that was my connection. So when he passed away and she called me crying and said, oh my gosh, we've got to do something. And I said, yeah, let's do something. It doesn't have to be complicated. Let's just do something. Let's honor him. And so when that happened, a couple of things came to me that I want to share with you if you want to go and kind of meditate on Bruce today, if you haven't read them. Amanda first passed on, well, first I'll tell you the other one. Mike Hamilton. Does everybody know who Mike Hamilton is?
No.
Okay, he was the gentleman who lived here for years and years that ran the James Reserve. You know, the James Reserve is a research institute kind of out there. Anyway, Mike Hamilton is like my scientific advisor if I ever need him for Good Morning Idyllwild. And so he is one of my subscribers. And so I wrote that piece in Good Morning Idyllwild about Bruce passing away, and Mike didn't know it, and he wrote to me. And he sent me this very beautiful email and said, oh my gosh, I can't stop thinking about Bruce. We were like nature buddies. We would talk science all day long. And so I wrote my blog about him today. And it is the scientific version of Bruce's life. And it's extremely interesting. And of course, it's not MikeHamilton.com. It's something weird called, I found it so I could tell you what it was. It's called Conversations with Claude. That's what it's called. Put in Mike Hamilton, Conversations with Claude, and you'll find it. Or email me. Email me, and I'll send you the direct link.
Claude with an A-U or an O?
I don't know.
C-L-A-U-D.
I don't know.
C-L-A-U-D.
But anyway, it was fascinating, and I learned about him and how he could talk all day about things, and really how from Mike Hamilton I learned how self-taught he was. He didn't have any degrees. He was all self-taught, and I thought that was amazing. And so I would be happy to share that with you. If you want to email me, I'll send you the link directly. That blog by Mike Hamilton was fascinating. The other thing that happened even before that was Amanda sent me an article that a person had written on a website called Faces of Idyllwild. I had never heard of Faces of Idyllwild, didn't know what it was. Apparently, she's not here, is she? There's a writer that just bought a house up here a year or two ago. I think her name is like Magali or something like that. Magali, thank you. Okay, so she wrote she has a website called Faces of Idyllwild, and she is a writer, like a travel writer, an international writer. And Bruce was one of 17 people that she had just interviewed and done a beautiful article on in November. She just did this article on him in November. And there's 17 people listed here, and they're all just regular. They're not famous people in Idyllwild or anything like that. They're regular people in Idyllwild, like you and me. And it's a wonderful website to find out things about. There's one about Bronwyn. I learned things about Bronwyn I never knew.
Mary.
Anyway, it's great. So she wrote this beautiful article about Bruce on Faces of Idyllwild. That's an easy one to find, Faces of Idyllwild. And it's several pages long. And so, full disclosure here, I have truthful Tourette's. I took that article because I wanted to have something to read at Bruce's memorial, because I don't know him that well, but now I feel like I really know him. I have been more connected to Bruce in planning this and talking to Amanda than anything that I ever would have had he still been alive. So I really feel connected to him now. So what I did is I took her entire article and I fed it into ChatGPT, and I said, give me a beautiful poem out of this article, everything in the article that I can read at his memorial. And it did it. It did it, and it's beautiful. I mean, my husband, who's never even met Bruce, was crying. So I want to read it to you as my contribution to Bruce. And then I also want to tell you that this is Amanda, my daughter-in-law, right here, which is Bruce's great niece. And this is Bruce's real nephew, not great nephew, real nephew, Randy, right there. So that's Randy. And so if you guys will know who the family is when you finish here. Also, one more thing, Bruce, or Randy, who was responsible for getting all of Bruce's stuff out of his house when he needed to do that, brought all kinds of pictures of his photographs and all of that, and cards. The Nature Center is going to be selling some of the cards and the smaller things that are easy to sell here, because we think Bruce would have wanted the Nature Center to benefit from that. And but we also brought the stacks of the smaller ones, and they're at the end here. And you're welcome to, before you leave, take a memento of Bruce with you, okay? And anything that is left over, we will sell here at the Nature Center, okay? Anyway, let me read you my poem, and I don't want to take credit for it, just for being creative on how to get it. And which is funny, because the name of it, after reading the whole article about him, the name that AI named it was The Man Who Chose Not to Be Known. Which is funny, because when I run into people, they go, I didn't really know Bruce. And he was the man who chose not to be known. I don't choose to be known, Bruce once said, and somehow we all knew him anyway. Not through headlines or noise, but through the quiet ways he showed up. The person you called when a flower needed naming, when a butterfly appeared, when the mountain revealed something it had been holding for years. He lived differently than most of us, up before dawn, walking softly into the day, camera in hand, paying attention to things many of us never see. And that was his gift, attention. He noticed the small things, counted them, learned them, loved them. And in doing so, he taught us, without ever trying, that the smallest things are not small at all. Bruce lived many lives. He wandered, he struggled, he lost his way and found it again. I got drunk once, he said. It lasted 6 years. But he came back, and when he did, he chose a life of clarity, of presence, of kindness. And kindness, that's what mattered most to him. When asked how he wanted to be remembered, he didn't mention the photographs or the knowledge or the thousands of days spent out on the trails. He said simply, kindness. To not judge, to accept people as they are, to meet the world with openness instead of resistance. Bruce didn't try to be important. He didn't try to be known. But he lived with such care, such presence, such quiet devotion to this place and this life that he became unforgettable. So maybe the best way to honor him is not just to remember him, but to live a little more like he did. To slow down, to notice, to be here. And to choose whenever we can, kindness. I would like all of you to feel free to just come up and tell a little story about Bruce. I'm going to ask Amanda and Randy if they want to talk. They don't have to, but if they want to, they should go first. let's make sure we get them in. And then anybody else who has something, just jump up here and tell us about it, okay?
Thank you, that was awesome. Well, wish we could all meet on different circumstances, but it is what it is. I'm Randy. I'm his oldest nephew, and my mother passed away, his sister, about 3 years ago. His other sister, Nancy, is still alive. She's living in Denver, Colorado. And same thing with his brother, William, who he's called Sweet William, lives with Nancy in Denver, Colorado. And he has nieces and nephews, and great nieces and great nephews, and a big family. But he had even a bigger family on the mountain. So I grew up here, all the way up to high school. And I walked every single trail that you can imagine, built forts, slept overnight. I even did a crazy thing where my mom drove me up, and we went up the tram and we hiked all the way back into Idyllwild. And we lived up by Saunders Meadow on Pine Drive. And my grandmother lived basically at the bottom of the trailhead, the top of this trail. So we used to ride the miles to get over there, walk, and we used to sled down to school. And when I tell my kids now that, we sled to school, but we had to walk home in 3 feet of snow, because back in the 70s, we did have 3 feet of snow up here. It was not uncommon, you know. That still don't believe me. But now Bruce, I don't know, a lot of you know his younger years, born out in Orange County, and he was a carnivore. He was a wrestler. He was actually a champion wrestler, and quite a different spectrum of life than what you know Bruce up here on the mountain. But he had ruptured his eye. I don't know if you've ever talked to Bruce, you would notice that one eye was off. So even for me as his nephew, I'd be like, he's like this one. I'm like, okay. But at a young age, when I was in middle school, Bruce would come over and he says, hey, and I didn't know Bruce's history, you know. He'd come over, hey, I heard you're going to be in wrestling. I'm like, yeah, I want to check it out. Junior high, right? And we had some bus all the way down to Emmett Junior High. And he come over and whooped on me. I mean, I could not believe it. I didn't understand what the underside of my uncle was like until we did our first night of wrestling in our living room. He was quite a strong and good wrestler. But a lot of people don't know that because that's not who he was. He had a best friend that lived in Hawaii, and when he lost him a few years ago, it was really hard on Bruce. Bruce lived in Hawaii. He worked on a farm out there. I don't know what kind of farm it was, but he worked on a farm out there. But, you know, he had real long hair, and he always was bald. You know, so he always had that bald no matter how much he grew his hair. And he loved it over there, but he missed the family. He missed it over here. My grandparents owned Burley's place up across from the old Idyllwild Fire Department. It used to be right across the street where they moved in. And I was really young then when they owned Burley's place. It was in the 70s. And my mom ended up moving up here, buying a house. They closed down Burley's place, opened Strawberry Creek Inn when they built the new Strawberry Creek Center. Lasted a couple of years, but I know that Bruce was working at the Gastronaut. I know he was a cook. He's a pretty good cook too, and he ventured into he transformed basically eating healthy, eating carnivore lifestyle to eating healthy in the vegan lifestyle, which I think probably prolonged his years in life. He suffered a heart attack at a young age in life, so I think that was another thing that changed him in his life. Of course, you know, once you grow up under the shadow of the rock, you can never leave, right? And it seems like we all divert back. I spent 32 years with CAL FIRE, and I did a lot of work on the mountain. And it's funny, they would give me assignments. So like, this is the trail. I'm like, I know where it's at. So we would bring in a hand crews up here and do forest mitigation, prep trails, work for the parks. We work for just about everything up here. So it's funny how even my career, it ended me back up here. But Bruce, we had a house down in Hemet. He would love to come down there. and he treated it like a spa. We had a nice pool and stuff. And he was always out there, loving the pool, sunbathing out there. It's this is never easy for anybody. It isn't. And his love and what he turned around, he didn't want notoriety, but he had a huge passion. His passion was almost like an OCD. Once he got into something, he went all into it. He had a huge passion for tropical fish, and then I know that he had done stuff for the elementary school, and he spoke on that. He wrote some transcripts that I found about having the perfect aquarium and setup for everything that you need. Then he started raising seahorses, and he fell in love with the seahorses. Oh my gosh. I know he tried to talk me into having a seahorse aquarium at my house. And at the time I had 5 young daughters, and I'm like, yeah, I don't have time to even go to the restroom, let alone take care of seahorses. We very good lucky if a goldfish survives in our house, right? But he went full force with that. And the time that he donated to the community, to the school, and teaching kids about tropical fish and seahorses, it was pretty cool, I went to Idyllwild Elementary School too. I think Adam, you went there too, didn't you? Yeah. But then he started to do photography, and I know, like I said, once he gets into something, it's a passion. And he was actually really good, For one good eye, he was really good. That good eye was probably magnified, to catch the things that he did. And even starting with, I found his old camera that he started with. It's just incredible the things that he had done. And then he started, I know with butterflies was a huge thing. His study of butterflies was brief until he started doing wildflower, and then I guess in the end part of his life he was doing moss studies too. But he found a real passion, he found a real interest in things, and he would go he would have knowledge beyond what some normal people would do. He had my grandfather was a marine biologist, and he was one of the top 10 marine biologists in the world. He's found 5 fish that nobody ever recorded in history. So I think that kind of, made it into Bruce somehow, But he didn't like the ocean. He'd rather be in the desert. Go figure on that, right? Loved the desert and loved exploring. Our whole family, we loved exploring. We loved camping. We loved nature. We always respected it. And I think that Bruce did the same. And I think with his studies and everything that he did, and I guess he found a species of flowers, that a lot of people didn't know existed up here. So, and I just know that just by talking to different people and actually reading through some of the stuff that Bruce had published. It was pretty cool. But, it's hard. And I appreciate all the love that you guys have for Bruce. The mountain is one thing, and it's incorporated the nature, the people, the weather, the shadows, the rocks. You're grounded once you're up here, and it's just hard to explain. But Lily people are different people. They are. And no matter, I ventured off the hill. I didn't want to go to high school riding a bus down the hill. So I moved out to my dad's in Corona. And it was a whole different life. I joined the fire department out there and all that. But I did work up here, the Pine Cove Fire Department. Did a lot of overtime up here. And was blessed. But like I said, once you live under the shadow, it always brings you back somehow, right? But I didn't prepare anything today. I just wanted to speak from my heart, And I know a lot of you had one experience with Bruce that brought you here today, and I'm sure that you knew the type of person he was, how much love he had in his heart for this mountain, for the people. And when I say this mountain, you're all included, right? You're part of the mountain. But it's he's got some books that he wrote that we're going to try to put together. And my daughter Amanda and and I guess would be my, I don't know, sister-in-law.
Amanda's mother-in-law.
I want to thank both of them for putting everything together. Amanda came down to my house and we went through a lot of stuff. It was very emotional. I can hold it together once I'm focused, and being a firefighter, I guess it hardened me that way. I did have some points where I broke down talking to my aunt. But Amanda, she had a real hard time, but she was able to rifle through it, and we grabbed a collection of photos, and what we have on the end, there's some photos, and there's some greeting cards and some different things. But knowing that it's going to be out on the mountain is important for us. And it's important to know. So last story I'll tell. When my grandmother died, I had her remains at my house. I set up a little memorial for her in my house, and I had an old antique fire engine up there, and on the mantle. And I hadn't wound it up. It's played Smoke Got in Your Eyes, right? And then my mother did. And I could not remember the last time I even touched that. But the night that I set out that memorial and lit that candle, and her thing was owls. I loved owls. Everything was owls. Her whole life. That thing started playing. And when I went to bed at night, and it freaked me out. My hair was standing up. I was like, okay, she's present. And I went up to bed at night, and on the corner of my bedroom, my windows open, get that fresh air. Because an owl wouldn't leave us alone all night long. And I knew that my grandmother visited us. When my mom passed away, it was the wind. And I had a turkey feather actually fall out of the sky right at my feet the day that she passed away. And then, of course, you know, the history of the raven here, but for that raven, now he's given us peace during this while we're talking. But I truly think that my uncle's spirit was in that right there. And I think he was truly talking to us right now. You know? Like you said, it's very rare for a raven to do that. You can hear him squawking all over the place. This guy was talking to us. And I turned to my wife, it's my wife Kristen, and I said, he's present. He's present here today. But I thank everybody, and it doesn't matter if you have 30 seconds to say a memory. We appreciate everything that everybody brings and all the love that you guys bring. Thank you guys very much.
My name's Norm Johnson.
Yeah.
And I've had a cabin up here for 30 years. I live in Costa Mesa. And Bruce was my best friend up there. So we would, every other weekend I'd come up here, and then the other weekends I'd go camping out in the desert or in the mountains. And I got to know Bruce from Nomad Adventures. When he was a manager there, I'd see him there. And then I went to a wildflower talk one time that Mike Hamilton was giving, and it was a great talk. And I saw Bruce at the back of the room when I left, and I got to talking to him after the thing was over. And I said, "Well, hey Bruce, if you want to see some wildflowers, they're really blooming at the hub right now. I'll meet you tomorrow morning and we'll go on a little wildflower hike." And so Bruce, agreed to that, and we met at the hub, and we walked down the road to, I think it's the middle road that winds down there, not the rural road. And I was pointing out the different wildflowers to him. This is Julia capitata, giving some scientific names. Apparently that started on wildflowers, because the next thing I know, he was going out every day looking for wildflowers. And at the same time, I introduced him to Tom Chester, who is probably one of the most famous botanists in Southern California right now. And Tom Chester comes up to Idyllwild a lot, And he does, he's not a trained botanist. He was trained, I think, at JPL as an engineer. But Tom Chester knows more about botany in Southern California than anybody. So I introduced Bruce to Tom, and then they became very, very, very good friends. And Bruce started doing botany. And it wasn't like he just went out and learned the names of the plants. He learned the names of every single plant on this mountain, and the scientific name, and when it bloomed, and where it bloomed, and just every little detail about it. To the extent that he was talking to Tom Chester every week, telling him, "Hey, I just saw a new thing up here. It's out here. It's And Bruce did real science, even though he never got a degree in science or anything like that. He took it to the point where he knew. I would call, I would send him texts when I was out camping. Hey, what is this that's blooming? And I learned botany by keying it out in a book. I had a plant key, Jepson manual, and I'd go through the Jepson manual and key the thing out the way I was trained to do. But Bruce never used a key in his life. His memory was so fabulous that he just remembered it all. He just stored it all in his memory, all the plant names and just everything about them. But it wasn't really botany that connected me with Bruce. It was butterflies, because my father was a biology teacher, and he grew up in Orange County, and he was a biology teacher, but he was also a lepidopterist, and a very famous Southern California lepidopterist. Back when they collected things with butterfly nets, now it's mostly with cameras. And so Bruce, pretty early on, told me he was working on writing a book on butterflies. And his book was not what the butterflies are, it was how to photograph butterflies. That was what the book was about. Not what butterfly is this, but how you sneak up and find them and where the plants it's going to be. And so it was all about photographing butterflies. And so I helped him out with that. I have some butterfly books that describe the species, and I helped him, discover a few. But he went way beyond what I know about butterflies. And I could spot a butterfly pretty well, but last time I went out with Bruce for a butterfly count, they were counting all the butterflies they count all the butterflies all over Southern California, and they break it down, and everybody's supposed to be responsible for a certain area. So Bruce was responsible for an area down by the hub, and he, knew I was going to be up that weekend, so he said, well, are you going to come with me? And so I came along, and I kept the clipboard, and I filled in the names and the numbers, and he would spot the butterflies. And you guys have seen butterflies, they flap along, He could spot a butterfly over there and know exactly what species it was. Just boom, oh, that's a Gadd's checker spot, Oh, that's a variable checker spot. Oh, that's a Hartford white. Oh, he knew every single butterfly from a distance. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Most people, you got to catch the thing, or you got to get a picture of it, and then you got to look at it up close and compare it to the little picture in the book and see if all the spots match, and then you can say, oh, well, I know what that is. Oh, Bruce could see it over there and say, oh, I know what that is. And these are little butterflies, blue, Melissa blues, and there's probably 10 different blues that live up here, and they all look exactly alike to me. I mean, unless I see them up close and have a book to look at and compare them to. Bruce would spot them and boom, Well, every other weekend I'd come up here, and Bruce would come over, and we'd watch a movie on Friday night. First, he'd come over at 5 o'clock, and we'd sit and we'd tell stories, because we both grew up. We were both about the same age, 70. I'm going to turn 75, Bruce was 75. And we'd tell stories about growing up in Orange County and being hippies. That was what the stories were about. And and traveling, and he had been to Jamaica and lived in Hawaii, and you know, so we'd tell our stories, and then we'd go watch a movie. Bruce was a big fan of movies. He remembered every movie better detail than I ever could. But and then we'd talk a little bit after the movie, and then on Saturday morning, I'd pick him up at 9 o'clock, and we'd spend the morning together. We'd either go for a hike here or there, or he'd have some plants. He would count flowers. So we'd maybe go on one of his counts. He once counted all the San Jacinto penstemons. You know, there were 14,000. He would spend a week and a half, 2 weeks, counting up to 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 flowers. And, he would be pretty sure he got every one. That's wandering all over Garner Valley. And I mean, it's pretty, and he would do it every day. I would just do it on every other weekend with him. But sometimes we would drive down to Anza Borrego and look at the elephant tree, or I took him out to the Marble Mountains one time to find trilobites. And we do a lot of stuff together. It was really fabulous. It was my buddy up here for going exploring, and then Saturday he'd come over, we'd watch a movie. He was so into movies that he was into film noir, and he got into film noir, and he, like Bruce, he watched every single film noir movie ever made. Over 1,000 movies. And he would watch one every night until he'd watched all 1,000. And then he decided to watch them all again. And he got on the film noir page on the internet and became a moderator on the page. And so this was just the way Bruce was. It didn't have to be plants, it didn't have to be butterflies, it didn't have to be seahorses. It could be, film noir. It could be. First, then I started about a year and a half ago on Western novels. So I read a lot. So I was reading these Elmer Kelton Westerns. Elmer Kelton was a very famous Western writer like Louis L'Amour. And so I was reading Elmer Kelton Westerns. And I left Idyllwild one Sunday, and Bruce went over to my house to check on something, and he found a book lying on the ground. Apparently it had fallen out of my ear as I was loading in the car. And so he picked it up, and he thought, well, I'm going to read this. Norm's reading these things. Maybe I'm going to read this. So he reads the thing. Well, I've got him started on Westerns. Then he had to read every single Elmer Kelton book. There were like 43 of them. And then I got him going on Tony Hillerman. And he read all 17 Tony Hillerman books. And then I got him started on Louis L'Amour. So he was about a third, maybe a quarter of the way through Louis when he passed away. But that was Bruce. It just, he had he got into mosses. He got into mosses because in the middle of winter there are no flowers and there are no butterflies, but they're mosses. It's their time. So next thing I know, he's out there. Of course, he's going out every day with his camera, and there's no butterflies and there's no flowers. So he starts in on mosses, and I don't know if you guys know about mosses. They're really hard to identify. All mosses pretty much look the same. But Bruce had, he had found 43 species of mosses.
Of course he did.
Up here in the mountains, and he would collect a little piece, and he would put it in get a little cup or a tray that he'd put them in plastic. And in his apartment then, he had a whole collection of mosses that he would get up every day and squirt with a spray bottle. And he would tell me, this one has to be vertical, this one has to be away from the sunlight, this one has to be in the sunlight. And, they all look the same to me. But mosses were pretty special. They were pretty special to Bruce, and he was fascinated by the fact that mosses are one of the few plants that could be completely desiccated with absolutely no moisture left in them at all. Completely dry out. And then if you spray them with the spray bottle, they come back to life and turn green immediately, within a minute. And so this really fascinated Bruce. But you know, this is him. That's him smiling. You know, this is him at his happiest when he's getting into nature. And I miss the guy. I wish he was here to go on a hike this morning. I wish we did. But I think he would tell us all that you know, just have to go on with life and enjoy it and get the joy out of it that he got out of it. I mean, he didn't wait his whole life to find blessing and joy and, you know, love for the world. He got up and did it every day. Anyway, that's my Bruce.
Thank you.
Chris, actually, Norm mentioned something that I'd like to make an announcement. I'll come this way. I don't want you guys all to get whiplash. So we do have our Wildflower Festival coming up. It's on Memorial Day weekend. And traditionally, Bruce would run some of the walks to collect them. We get a permit from Fish and Wildlife from the National Park System to be able to collect them to have on view. So if anybody is interested in joining some of these walks to collect wildflowers, I don't know what the season's going to be like with the weather being bipolar, as someone mentioned to me. But please contact me at the Nature Center, and we can see if you can join any of the groups that are going to go collecting. Be a good way to remember Bruce this year.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody, I'm Steve Cuellar, Mars Giles. Many of you probably only know me on Facebook because I'm on way too much. But we've known Bruce for many years. He was one of the first person we met up here. We've been up here a little over 12 years. And so, you know, he's the most amazing person. We, as many of you know, he's been a vegan for decades, and we're both vegan. We started a vegan group up here on Facebook, and it's got like over 5,000 members now if anybody wants to join. And he came to our potlucks. Every single one of them he was there with his stews and his soups. He was an amazing cook. And, you know, so we've known him for a long time, and I got to know him even more when his truck broke down, you know, a couple months before he passed us into the desert to go shopping. 2 hours down there, you know, and it was never a moment that he wasn't talking about something. I got so much information from him. And of course, I saw him a couple days before I passed him through my prescription, and you know, so it was a crazy thing. Nobody could believe it, but he was an amazing person. We're glad that we met him. I know that he had posted something on Facebook. He was also on Facebook. And during COVID, we were all stuck in our house a lot, you know, just because that's how it was. And he was posting a lot. He was reading a lot. He was doing a lot of things. You know, when he wasn't reading 80,000 books. He was posting, and he posted something about his life. Like his life, he wasn't ashamed of any of it. You know, it was what he was. So I thought I would read that to give everybody a sense of, like, you know, his whole life. So the first was called "Stepping Out of the Shadows," Part 1 of 3. The time has come to reveal my darkest secret. This is something I kept hidden for 74 years. I never told my parents, my teachers, my siblings, or my friends. The reason is I went to school before my problem had been diagnosed, and I had no idea what was wrong with me. It was only when I was an adult that I found out that I had severe form of dyslexia. I knew something was wrong because I was slow to talk, and reading and spelling seemed very difficult. I still have problems with spelling, especially words that have 3 syllables or more. So far, I've had to Google dyslexia, especially in syllables, and I will have to look them up the next time I use them. When it was time to switch from print to script writing, I was a complete failure. I couldn't read or write in script and always got the worst grade in handwriting. I continued to use print for the rest of my life, and even then sometimes have trouble reading my own writing. When I was a child, I tried to read Superman comic book to a friend. When I came to the word idiot, I pronounced it I-dot. He laughed at me and called me an idiot. Since I had no guidance, I resorted to reading the dictionary. It was a big, fat dictionary and started with A and read every word, learned to pronounce them and what they meant. I still could spell them, but could now comprehend language. A few months ago, I read an article about someone like me coming out and telling the world about her dyslexia. I decided to tell my friend Norman. In the article, the woman talked about her struggles and how she overcame them and became an author and an editor. Her story was like she had read my mind about all the things that happened when I was in school. The one thing that she felt was her savior was that she had an amazing memory, and this is also something I was gifted with. I was a C student in high school, as I got A's and B's in subjects I liked, history and natural science, and C's and D's in English and math. I loved history and still remember reading all the biographies in the school library. I took the SATs and scored much higher than my GPA would indicate. After graduating from Marina High School at 17, I decided to go to Golden West College in Huntington Beach. It was called a junior college back then. It was 1967, and I can no longer hide my learning problems at the college level. I took a writing class, and the first day the teacher told the class that if there were any spelling or punctuation errors on our papers, we would get an automatic F. I left the classroom and dropped the class the same day. And then he started on the second part, Stepping Out of the Shadows, part 2 of 3. In 1968, I went full pot smoking, LSD taking, spirited hippie. I was put on probation due to low grades, but I had no intention of returning to classes. I couldn't function in school after I started smoking pot and taking psychedelics. Besides, I was at a point when I was reading one book after another. I thought I was learning more by reading than I would at school, and I read hundreds of books on history, sci-fi, poetry, nonfiction novels, books on yoga and spirituality. I would finish one book and start another the same day. This went on for a decade. Even though I was a slow reader, I remember most of what I read. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was dumb. I had confidence in my intellect and could talk about many subjects and quote famous authors. By 1970, I started drinking to my drug intake and found out that, like my father, I was an alcoholic and things soon got out of hand. I moved to Hawaii in 1971 and stayed for a year. Once back in Orange County, I moved back in with my parents and got a job working in a shoe store. By 1972, I had enough and I quit drinking, smoking, and cleaned up my act. I stayed sober until 1976, but when I went back to drinking, it was so much worse than my first go-around with booze. I stayed drunk and smoked cigarettes for 6 years, someone mentioned. In 1982, I had enough and quit drinking and smoking for good. I quit reading and had no hobbies outside of alcohol. My language skills had deteriorated to the point that I was almost illiterate. I decided to start again by doing crossword puzzles, so I did the LA Times puzzle every day from 1982 to this morning and counting. Reading became a big part of my life again, and for the first time I started trying to read poetry, short stories, and fantasy novels. I wasn't very good at writing fiction because I was just mimicking other writers' works. What I was good at was finding a subject, like tropical fish, and learning everything I could about their breeding and care. I spent more than a half a century studying and breeding tropical fish and growing plants in aquariums. I made friends with Jim Forsythe of the Aquatic Book Club, and he arranged for me to give talks on growing aquatic plants at the Sacramento and San Francisco Aquarium Societies. This was a big deal, as the FASS was the biggest and oldest aquarium club on the coast. The high point of my aquarium career was learning to breed seahorses in the aquarium. This led to a seahorse talk at the SFAS. They flew me up to San Francisco, picked me up at the airport, sent me up to a nice hotel, took me out to dinner, and paid dollars for my talk. I was surprised to see over 500 people show up.
Wow.
For the first time in my life, I felt accepted and a little proud of myself. The best thing about my experience with seahorses was when Jim asked me to help him with the seahorse book. This book was called Family, I can't see the name, Seahorses, Sea Dragons, and Pipefishes Bibliography by Jim Forsythe and Bruce Watt. My book was ready to review books on seahorses and study supplies from aquariums. So this is the first time I was a published author and photographer. Stepping Out of the Shadows, Part 3. I worked as a chef, cook for most of the 80s and 90s. I retired from cooking in 1999 and took a job in a local rock climbing and hiking store. One day I got a call from Idyllwild Town Crier asking if I knew who would write an outdoor column I said about me. Letter asked me to stop by the office. I took a sampling of my writing. I showed up with my Seahorse book and I got the job. For the next 7.5 years, I could write the Outside Idaho column, which appeared on page 3 of the Town Crier. I bought a camera and started to get serious about photography. I wrote 390 weekly columns with a total of 204,759 words. Subjects varied from hiking trails, outdoor gear, wildlife, butterflies, and sometimes just humorous stories about nature. When I turned 62, I retired from my job and became a full-time writer and photographer. I began compiling a list of wildflowers and butterflies and San Jacintos and started working on many other writing projects. I wrote a vegan soup cookbook, a poetry book with photographs, an autobiography of the years 1968 to 75, and a book on classic era 1941 to 98 film noir. I was going all well in my life, and then the pandemic hit in 2020. I came down with COVID. I got sick 3 times with COVID, but the first time left me with a serious case of brain fog. Everything I learned seemed to be out of reach of my mind. I couldn't write at all. And for the next year or so, I was able to put words together to form sentences. I also lost the ability to type. Being stuck indoors with nothing much to do, I started blogging on Facebook in the pandemic. I also started to watch classic film noir movies. I watched one every day at 4 p.m. sharp. I set a goal of watching a movie every day for 1 year. Then I decided to go 500 days, then 2 years, then 1,000 days. And I finally stopped at 1,095 days, which is 3 years. I'm now at 80,000 words for my book titled 500 Days in the Dark. As I write this, and I'm 2 months away from my 75th birthday, I have overcome my disability, and there is still a scar on my sight and the fear that others will find out my secret. So I'm writing this story so that my dyslexia will no longer be a dark secret. After all these years, I've decided to step out of the shadows and into the light. That was pretty good,
Yeah.
Throughout his whole life, and for us, like I said, we've been friends for a long time. He was one of our best friends up here. And we miss him. I'm sure we all do. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bruce used to tell me he was really proud of you.
I promise to be really quick, guys. My name is Amanda. Bruce is my great uncle, and I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today. It's so great to see all of the people who meant so much to him, and obviously he meant so much to all of you. So thank you for being here. I wrote something, so hopefully I can get through it. Very short. Sorry. My uncle loved Idyllwild deeply. It wasn't just where he lived, it was where he belonged. We all know he spent his time among the wildflowers, noticing and caring for the small, beautiful details that so many of us pass by without a second thought. In some ways, I think he may have been overlooked like that too. Quietly present, easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention, but full of a kind of beauty, meaning that mattered. Even though he kept to himself, which sounds like that might not have been the case. It sounds like he has a really beautiful community, and even though he kept to himself, his life wasn't small. It was thoughtful, gentle, and deeply meaningful in ways that don't call attention to themselves, but still leave a lasting impact. I'm grateful for who he was, for the example he set, and for the quiet way he moved through the world. I feel so honored to be his great niece. I love him very much, and I'm gonna miss him a lot too. Thank you so much for being here.
So I moved up here about 7 years ago, intending to be a children's nature educator. And there was only one small problem with that. I'd never lived up here before, and I really didn't know the local ecosystem at all. I was hugely lucky to see some of Bruce's posts and noted that he was a meditator, a vegan, and a nature person, and I'm those things as well. And so I contacted him, and as you all know, he has, had an amazing, large, and open heart, and said, "Oh, sure, I'd love to go for a nature walk with you." And that's kind of how I learned my way around here. Going on nature walks with Bruce was an incredible experience for those of you who haven't done it, to see this man in his 70s just turn into a little kid. I think it's one of the superpowers of those of us as we get older, that we can see the little child in older people. But with Bruce, anybody could see it. He'd be, his knees weren't great. He didn't get around all that easily, but he'd get out into a meadow and he'd see one of those butterflies 70 feet away, but he'd need to go get closer to get a photo of it. And you could just, he'd scamper, and you could see the joy on his face. Most of my joy in nature comes from being out in nature, but when I was out in nature with Bruce, it was from watching Bruce's joy, which just overflowed. It was amazing. One of my big jobs when I was out with him, sometimes, like others of you have mentioned, I'd hold the clipboard or write down the numbers, or occasionally spot something. But my big job was he loved to leave his walking sticks behind. So I would sort of scurry around behind him and try. He would be watching the butterflies and the flowers and the moss, and I'd be tracking his walking sticks. Two things I wanted to mention, sort of towards the end of his and my relationship, I guess, because it's the end of Bruce. Not the end of our relationship, it will go on forever. But we did get a couple of his pictures where my wife and I are having a book published, Explorations in Ecology for Children and Their Adults, and we did get some of Bruce's pictures of wildflowers in the book. And the last thing I want to say is just a message to everybody. Bruce and I guess I can be a dick sometimes, because Bruce and I got a tiny bit crosswise, and it's not easy to get crosswise with Bruce. And I'm not exactly sure how it happened. It wasn't really a fight, it was sort of a confusion over some communication, probably about 8 months ago. And is Allison here? It was actually over the Manzanita poster. Anyway, we cleaned it up, and I am so happy. So I guess the last thing I want to say to everybody is, if you got somebody you love and you're a little crosswise with them, don't wait, because I would be torn apart right now had I not gotten back with Bruce and started rekindling our friendship and going on all those woods walks and stuff like that. So, anyway, love you, Bruce.
I'm Steven. For those of you that don't know me, some of you know me through Idyllwild Experience, right? But I've been on the mountain here a decade. And I think I was here maybe 6 months. And I started asking around, like, who knows about wildflowers and all the nature stuff on the mountain? They said, have you met Bruce? I said, no. And they said, well, you gotta meet Bruce. So I did. And every spring, Bruce and I went, usually at the end of the month, because Bruce had trouble with money. So at the end of the month, he needed gas money. So I would pick up Bruce, and he would say, I want to go to the hub, or I want to go up to Block Mountain. And so I spent a half a morning with Bruce learning everything I could learn from Bruce. And I guess I just want to say that everybody here knows, right, that Bruce was a citizen scientist. Like if you look up citizen scientist in the dictionary, Bruce's picture should be right there. He's the quintessential citizen scientist, right? He explored deeply and he discovered things we never knew existed. And I brought this. It's my favorite picture. Bruce called it what? You know this, right? What did he call this? Everybody know? Anybody know? What did he call this flower?
Lemon lily.
Lilium perryi, right?
Yes.
Okay. But he called this Big Mama. He labeled it on the back here for me. It's his favorite picture of lemon lilies. It's coming up, right? The Wildflower Festival. He called it Big Mama because he counted 27 buds and blooms on this one plant. And that is something, like, this plant to me represents Bruce because it's blooming. It has more blooms than anybody's ever done, right? And this is nearly extinct. People like Bruce, they're almost extinct. This is an endangered species, folks. So is Bruce. And that's all I want to say.
Amanda's still here. Amanda. The first time I knew anything about Bruce was I was asked to write an article about him for the Friends newsletter that is associated with the Nature Center. And I was in San Diego at the time. I don't like to talk on the phone, but I thought, okay, I gotta talk to this guy because I've already heard so much about him. And the reason it's for you is that even without meeting him, talking to him on the phone for about 15 minutes, I thought, like just what Stephen just said, here is a citizen scientist, but somebody that can tell a story with brilliance. It can really touch your heart and you could listen to forever. So he'll never be forgotten, even by people who never met him. And then the other thing, living in Idyllwild, he's just one of those people that you think, I am so happy I live in a place where a guy like this chose to live. So that's my thoughts about it.
Hello. I know most of the people in the crowd, but not everybody. I was the ranger here for a couple of years. I met Bruce very early on as a naturalist. He was always here at the Nature Center. I've learned a lot about him today.
You're Sunny, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Hi, I'm Sunny. Sorry.
We should recognize
Yeah, Sunny.
you.
Sorry. Not very good at this sometimes. I saw Steven's Facebook post last night and knew that even though my kids are extremely busy today, my daughter's graduating from Girl Scouts and my kids got a play that I had to drop him off this morning. I was like, I have to be here for Bruce. He was an inspiration. I came up here, always wanted to be part of the mountain. I was a flatlander, unfortunately. But he made me feel welcomed, and I think I shared a passion for nature with him that, you know, coming up as the Nature Center Ranger, I didn't know mountain ecology. I knew the deserts, I knew the chaparral and the transition zones, but he really helped me a lot with understanding this and was just instrumental in the Wildflower Show and the Lemon Lily Festival and the Butterfly Day Festival and helped me put all of those things on. I'll give one anecdote. My favorite story was I was helping him with the Wildflower Show, and he said, "There's one flower that I really, really want in this show this year, and it's this cherry tree. I've only seen it in one place on the mountain." And I was like, "How does this guy know where this exact one tree that he saw several years ago exists?" And he goes, "You need to go to Lawler Alpine Lodge, hike down to the stream, go about 100 yards to the left, you gotta hop across a rock over here, and if you look to your right, there's the tree, and I need one of those blooms for the show. And I was just like, okay, sure, like I will make that happen for you. And sure enough, I went to Lawler Lodge and followed his instructions, and there was this magnificent dogwood, white flowering, blossoming tree that I had never seen on the mountain before, and he knew exactly where it was, and that to me was just like, this guy knows the mountain better than anybody I've ever met. It's going to be a real shame to not see a little blue truck driving around town. So that's all I got. Thank you.
My name is Pamela Mayfield, and I've lived on the mountain for almost 11 years now. And the Nature Center was my favorite place to stop in to visit when I first arrived here, and I fell in love with it. And after a few months, I was invited to be on the board of directors through a friend. And shortly thereafter, the man who was the editor for the newsletter quit, and so I volunteered to take on that responsibility, and I've been doing it ever since and love it. And so I recommend everyone become a friend of the Nature Center and get the newsletter and find out all the things that happen here, which are wonderful. And I met Bruce through his presentations here, and I just love nature, that's why I'm here. And so I asked if I could join him one morning on one of his walks, and we went to Fulmore Lake to count the butterflies, and we chatted about our life histories, and that was when I found out about seahorses. And I'm going to really miss his presentations here that he did on a regular basis, and he, just a sweet, sweet soul, and will be greatly missed.
I just want to say one thing. Bruce didn't have a lot of money. He kind of got by on the very minimum. And everybody here I know helped him out at one time or another. And I just want to thank all of you people. And I know Bruce told me many times about how he appreciated the people that would give him rides, that would help him with gas money, that would let him borrow their car, that would, and it went on and on. There's quite a list. So, all of you people, Bruce appreciated you, every one of you. Thank you.
This is one of Bruce's photographs. I'm Bronwyn Jones, and I've lived up on the hill now for full-time for 25 years, but I've been coming up here for 35 years. And I first met Bruce, I think it was called the Uptown Cafe, where Roma is now.
Yeah.
And he was making scones, and he was an incredible cook, chef. And I'd go up there and I'd buy a scone, and we'd get into a conversation, and they're not scones, by the way.
Yes, ma'am.
So we would bump into each other now and then, and one day when I was coming up to the cabin on Lodge Road where my now husband lived, and we would spend the weekends, every weekend from Los Angeles up here in Ottawa for probably 12 years. All of our friends thought we were mad. We'd leave on Friday afternoon and come home Sunday night until they spent the weekend with us. And then they understood why we were here. So nobody had ever gardened in David's lovely little cabin that was built in 1936. And he would get a little stoned on a Saturday afternoon, turn on the ball game, and I'd say, David, do you mind if I go out and dig in he knows about divas. So I started gardening, and one day I was weeding the driveway. How many of you weeded your driveway? Because it's just whatever. And I saw these kind of gray-blue leaves, really beautiful down here, and I thought, whoa, who are you? And because I'd been a city person from the time I was 18 until, I'd gone city. But I was a gardener at heart, and I always had lots and lots of plants. And every week, everybody would come to me and give me their plants when they were sick, and I'd take care of them. So every weekend I'd come and I'd check out this little patch of blue-gray leaves, and suddenly I saw this stalk coming up like this with these little things on it, and I went, whoa, there's something going to happen here. And so a week later I came back, and there were these little purple flowers, and they started at the bottom, and every week I came back there were more purple flowers open. And then I thought, what is this? My eyes, it was an epiphany. It was a grape soda lupin. And it was a native plant. I knew nothing about native plants in this but then I just started seeing. I started seeing things that I had never seen before, and I fell in love with native plants. I joined the garden club. At the time, most of the people who were in the garden club were more interested in impatiens and zinnias and things like that. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I said, but I want to know about these native plants. Well, I won't go into the whole long story, but one thing led to another, and eventually I and two friends, Jackie Lassiter and Edith Briggs, opened a native plant nursery in town, where Idyllwild Gardens now is. It's been through several iterations since we started it and found it, and just... So, needless to say, at this point, let's see, Bruce was making soup on the weekends in the restaurant behind. I don't know, I can't remember what the cafe was called then. It's now going to be Celestina. Like everything in Idyllwild, it's going through all of these iterations. And so he would, and we didn't have a bathroom, so we'd go back to the restaurant and we'd use the bathroom, and we'd talk to Bruce. He'd come over and he'd take a break. And what I learned with Bruce is he knew all about the native plants. And so I'd ask him a question, and then I'd just kind of stand back. And just volumes of information would come out. And he'd go, this and this, and we became friends through the native plants. And I don't know what to say except to say how much I'm going to miss him. When I found the email that Bruce had died, the night before, I had taken someone home and who lived on Lower Pine Crest, and I drove by his house, and I thought, gosh, I just heard that he was sick. Oh, he had posted online that he needed someone to go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. And so I thought, as I drove by his place and I saw his truck, I thought, I wonder how Bruce is. I hope he's okay. The next morning, I opened up my Facebook page and found that he died. I was just, as they say in England, gobsmacked. I couldn't imagine life on this hill without seeing Bruce. He was a dear heart. He was a meditator. He got up every morning at 4 o'clock and sat for an hour with his cat Pee-wee. I think Pee-wee died just recently, and that it was devastating for him. Because Pee-wee would sit with him, would meditate with him every morning. I don't know what else to say except I loved Bruce. I always looked at every single photograph that he posted, almost every day, and put little hearts on everything. We'd have conversations back and forth on different plants. He was a lover of nature. I always would come to the Memorial Day gathering and see all the plants that have been. In fact, I'll be involved this year too. Although, I mean, I don't know the names of plants, and I don't particularly care. I just love to look at them.
I was going to give you another.
So,
Smell them.
bless you, Bruce. I'm just so grateful that you have been a part of my life, and I carry you in my heart always. So thank you.
I'm going to go way back here. I met Bruce from Bob and Evelyn, and Judy, sister, and back in the Burley's days, probably 45, almost 50 years ago. And he and my husband at the time, Jimmy Love, became fast friends. And they had so much in common. They loved to be creative, talk about art, talk about life, where it came from, where it's going, how can we help it, improve it. Their conversations were so fun to hang out with. I mean, I just had a blast with them. And there's a period of time when he was just head over heels in love with Julie Plummer, and we spent, the four of us spent a lot of time together as best friends. And I was very happy to say that I had soups made by Bruce. He taught me how to make my favorite holiday soup, the butternut squash with a squeeze of red pepper thing on top, and creme brulee. Oh, homemade creme brulee that was to die for. We took a lot of pictures. Jimmy was really into photography and art, and I don't know, Bruce wasn't that much into it when we were friends then, but Jimmy was like one of those guys that liked to have his eyes like to the moss, to the little penstemons, the little things in the flowers where the pollen came from, where the bee flew away from the flower and had the pollen hanging on his back legs, you know. And they totally enjoyed each other's company and had fun and played and talked, and we had a really good time together. And someone here mentioned today that he was so much into the mosses, and I can picture Jimmy and him like just huddling down and going, there's this and there's that, you know. And just to wrap it all up, I do love Bruce and will miss him. Big part of my childhood and growing up here. And if I had a squirt bottle to spray the moss, I'd spray Bruce too.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak about Bruce?
I think I'm going to. I don't know who's going to. I think I'm just doing this because of what Jerry just said. I'm Chris Fox. Oh, and I wore these pants today because the first time I ever wore them, I saw Bruce in the Fairway Market, and I hear this, "Chris, you have butterflies on your pants!" Like 50 feet away or whatever. So I thought I'd wear them today and hope that Bruce can maybe see us all here celebrating him. I met Bruce at Burley's, and then I was fortunate enough to work with him at the Breadbasket. And nobody's talked about that yet, but I just thought I'd say that because he was my best friend for a long time. I have photos of him at my family's Thanksgiving dinner and things down in Whittier. He was very part of my children's life. My kids remember him as the aquarium guy because they were super little when they knew him, and when we'd go over to his house, it was always like a learning experience for them. They're both really intelligent and love science, and so, you know, he was always enthralling them, and so that was really wonderful. The thing that I jumped up for mostly is because we all worked together at the Breadbasket, and then Julie Plummer came along, and they started their love affair, and I lost my friend. Aw, I mean, I didn't lose him forever, because we've always been very dear and close with each other, but she took him away from me in a way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was my best friend. Anyway, that's what happened.
And he totally gets into.
Yeah.
Totally gets
so
into.
And he's into you when he's into you. So it felt really good to have him when I did as his person like that. You know what I mean? But anyway, so I just am, oh gosh, I'm going to miss him so much. And I have this new project that I want to put moss all in my outside shower somewhere, and I was knowing that I'd be able to have him come over and like we could go moss hunting for my moss in my shower, because maybe some of them are going to lie down, maybe some of them are going to stand up and all that. I really need to know, so if anybody knows anything that Bruce taught you, I need to do some moss experiments here. But anyway, I'm going to miss him so much. I'm going to miss the little texts of like pictures of cookies and saying come over and such. So he was very generous in that way too. I don't know how many people got fed by him, but it felt like he'd be like, oh, I'd make gluten-free, so here's the cookies of the week, right? And then you'd go and he'd give you a little container of your favorite food or whatever. So anyway, I love him so much. He's always going to be in my heart, as I know he will in yours. So thank you.
We'll officially call it an end, but of course you can stay and catch up with people that you haven't seen and visit, and then also please come and take a picture of Bruce's home with you at the end as well. Is there anybody else that is just waiting?
I just remembered something in that my last conversation with him, I was having brain freeze on the name of something, and I called him and I said, what is the name of, and I described it. I said, lichen, and going, oh,
She was your scientific advisor. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and participating and celebrating Bruce's life and visit with you. We haven't seen in a while.
Good. How are you?
Still writing?